The debrief chamber smelled of antiseptic and old fear. Voreth pressed his remaining functional hand against the table's cold surface and tried to stop shaking. He could not. The tremor had started 9 days ago in the ventilation shaft of the Kesoth research station, and it had not stopped since. The medical officer across from him, a Dremery woman named Ilesi whose crest lay flat against her skull in a way that meant she was already unsettled, studied her datapad and said nothing for a long time. "Start from the end," she said finally. "Tell me what you saw when extraction arrived." Voreth's throat clicked, the end, as if there was a clean end to any of it. "When extraction cut through the station's emergency bulkhead," he said, "they found me in the cargo bay. I was behind a filtration unit. I had been there for, I don't know, 2 days, maybe 3. The station's chronometer had been destroyed by then. Everything had been destroyed by then. And the human. She was sitting in the command center, 4 decks up from where I was hiding. Sitting in the primary chair, drinking water from a canteen she had made out of a severed coolant hose and a piece of hull sealant. Her feet were up on the console. When the extraction team breached the command door, she looked up at them and said." He stopped, his voice had broken. "What did she say, Specialist Voreth?" He looked at the medical officer. His good eye, the left one, the one that still tracked properly, found hers. "She said, 'What took you so long?' and she smiled." Ilesi made a note. Voreth noticed her hand was not entirely steady either. "I need you to understand something," Voreth said. "When we boarded that station there were 41 of us, trained Kesoth security specialists, full combat rigs, sidearms, suppression grenades, ionic lances. We had a biological sciences team, a containment unit, 3 field medics. We had a tactical AI running Overwatch through the station's sensor grid, 41 of us, and 1 human. 1. The human was the research subject. The human was Dr. Marin Sadler, xenobiological consultant. She had been on the station for 11 months studying the Kesoth immune response archives. She was a civilian, a scientist, 43 years old. When I first saw her, she was wearing a gray pullover and reading something on a handheld screen in the station's mess hall. She looked like nothing, small, unremarkable. Her hair was going gray at the temples. She had a habit of pushing her reading glasses up her nose with 1 finger. I remember thinking she seemed tired. "And you were there, as part of the security escort." "We were there because the Conclave Intelligence Bureau had flagged the station for a priority extraction. Something about compromised data. I never saw the full briefing. My unit, 12 operatives under Commander Thesic, was one of 3 teams rotating station security. When things started, we had been on board for 6 days. 6 quiet days of watching scientists work and escorting supply transfers and running patrol routes that never changed." Ilesi scrolled through her datapad. "I want to go back before the end. Tell me about day 7. Voreth closed his eye. Behind the lid the station assembled itself. The long corridors of polished alloy. The blue-white lights that hummed at a frequency just below hearing. The smell of recycled air and the faint chemical sweetness of the Kesoth climate systems. And underneath everything, something else. Something that had been there before any of them understood what it meant. "Day 7 was when it started," he said. "But I need to tell you about day 9 first. Before I lose the nerve. Day 9 is the end. Day 9 is the reason I am the only one sitting in this chair." He could feel his pulse in his ruined hand. The medical team had sealed the wound, 3 fingers gone, sheared clean at the second knuckle, by a maintenance hatch that had closed on his hand when he tried to crawl through it in the dark. But they had told him the nerve damage was permanent. He would never hold a weapon in that hand again. He had not told them he did not want to. "On day 9, he said, "I was in the ventilation network between decks 3 and 4. The main corridors were impassable, not because they were blocked, because she was in them. Thesic's team, what was left of it, had tried to reach the shuttle bay through the central spine 12 hours earlier. That was the last time I heard from any of them. Their comms went static one by one over the course of about 40 minutes. No screaming. That was the thing that hollowed me out. There was never any screaming. What was there? Silence, and then sometimes a sound like metal being bent slowly, like someone was reshaping the station's bones around us, like the walls were learning a new shape. The human was doing this. Dr. Sadler had been, I do not know the right word, she had been remaking things. After the power went out on day 8, after the emergency lighting failed and the tactical AI went offline and the oxygen recyclers dropped to backup, she adapted. That is the word the science team used before they stopped responding. Dr. Vess, our senior medical officer, sent his last report at 400 on day 9. 5 pages. The subject heading read, Unrestricted optimization in human biology, urgent reclassification required. In the margins he had written, in his own hand, a single sentence. I believe we are observing a species-level capability that has no precedent in conclave records. He sent that report to the conclave. He sent it. The conclave received it 11 hours later. By then it did not matter. Ilessi set the datapad down. Go back, day 7. The containment breach. Voreth exhaled. He told her about the morning, routine shift. 3 teams rotating through the station's 12 primary sections. Dr. Sadler in her assigned quarters or in the research wing, always quiet, always working. She kept to a schedule: wake at 600, coffee in the mess hall, 12 hours in the archive room, dinner alone, sleep. She spoke to the security teams only when spoken to. She was polite. She was forgettable. She was the last person on that station anyone would have looked at twice. At 3:40 station time, the biocontainment alarm triggered in Lab 4, Voreth said. It was the Kesoth immune samples. Something in the isolation array had destabilized. Not the samples themselves, the containment field. The field just collapsed. No warning. No degradation curve. One moment it was holding, the next it was not. And the pathogen was released. It was not a pathogen. It was an immune response catalyst, Kesoth designed. The science team explained it to us during the initial briefing. It was a compound engineered to accelerate cellular repair in Kesoth tissue, designed for battlefield medicine, rapid wound closure, accelerated toxin processing, faster recovery from blunt trauma. They had been studying it because they thought they could adapt it for cross-species medical applications. That is why Dr. Sadler was there. She was the human biology specialist. She was supposed to help them model whether their catalyst could interact safely with non-Kesoth organisms. The irony, Ilessi said. The irony, Voreth agreed. She was there to study the thing that changed her. When the containment failed, everyone in Lab 4 was exposed. 6 Kesoth researchers, 2 of our security operatives, Dresk and Paller, both Thesic's team, and Dr. Sadler. She had been in the lab working a late shift on the data arrays, cross-referencing immune response sequences between Kesoth and Terran biology. The effect on Kesoth tissue. Nothing. It was their catalyst, designed for their biology. The Kesoth researchers showed no symptoms at all. Our 2 operatives, a Dremori and a Vorathi, showed mild cellular irritation, skin rash, elevated temperature. The field medics administered a standard anti-inflammatory and cleared them by midday. And Dr. Sadler. Voreth's tremor intensified. He pressed both hands flat against the table, the ruined one and the intact one, and held them there until the shaking was just a vibration he could talk over. Dr. Sadler said she felt fine. She reported a slight headache, her skin was flushed. She declined treatment. She said she wanted to keep working. Dr. Vess insisted on a bioscan, full spectrum. He ran it at 400 and again at 600. The first scan showed her white blood cell count had tripled in 2 hours. The second scan, 2 hours later, showed it had quintupled. Her body was responding to the catalyst with a speed that Vess described in his notes as, and I am quoting from the file that the conclave eventually declassified, he wrote, "The human immune system is not responding to the catalyst. It is recruiting it. It is treating the Kesoth compound as raw material and incorporating it into its own repair architecture." He underlined the word recruiting 3 times. Recruiting. That was the moment Vess understood something was different. In every other species, the catalyst was inert or mildly irritating. In human biology, the immune system did not fight it off or ignore it. It absorbed it, took it apart, rebuilt it, used it. Ilesi made a note, then another. Then she put the stylus down and simply listened. "Go forward," she said. "What happened as the day progressed?" By midday on day 7, Dr. Sadler reported that her headache had cleared. She said she felt better than she had in months. She said her sleep the night before, the 3 hours after the exposure, had been the best rest she had gotten since arriving on the station. Dr. Vess ran another scan. Her muscle tone had increased. Not dramatically, it would have been invisible to the eye, but the scan showed a 4% increase in muscle fiber density across major groups. Her resting heart rate had dropped from 62 beats per minute to 54. That is significant. Vess thought so. He flagged it in his report to Commander Thesick. Thesick read the report and asked Vess one question. "Is she a threat?" Vess said no. She was a civilian scientist whose body was processing a foreign compound more efficiently than expected. He recommended continued monitoring. Thesick approved the recommendation and returned to duty. At that moment, 1300 on day 7, Dr. Maren Sadler was sitting in the archive room reading a journal article about Kesoth antibody cascades. She had a cup of coffee. She was wearing her reading glasses. She was the least threatening person on the station. But her body was running a process that none of us understood. Every hour the catalyst integrated deeper. Every hour the governors came off a little more. Governors. That is Vess's term. In his declassified notes, he described human biology as a system of nested governors, pain thresholds that limit exertion, fatigue chemicals that enforce rest, caloric constraints that prevent the body from burning faster than it can refuel. He compared it to an engine designed to run at 60% capacity, not because it cannot run at 100, but because running at 100 would consume the engine. The governors exist to keep the system survivable over a long lifespan. The Kesoth catalyst did not know about the governors. It was designed for a biology that did not have them. When it hit a system that did, it treated them as damage, as something to be repaired, as limits to be removed. And it removed them. One at a time, hour by hour, like picking locks. Voreth paused, drank water. The glass felt enormous in his 3-fingered hand. Day 7, evening, 1900 hours. Vess ran the 4th scan of the day. This is the one that changed the trajectory. Everything before this was interesting. After this, it was something else. Tell me. Her visual acuity had sharpened to a degree that Vess's optometric scanner could not fully measure. He estimated her ability to resolve fine detail had roughly doubled since morning. Her auditory range had expanded. She could hear frequencies that the Kesoth used for subsonic equipment calibration. Frequencies that were not supposed to be audible to any biological organism on the station. Her reaction time, tested on a standard motor response panel, had dropped from the human average of 250 milliseconds to 90. And there was something else. Something Vess noted in his file with a question mark beside it, as if he did not entirely believe his own equipment. What? Her proprioception, her ability to sense the position of her own body in space, had expanded beyond her skin. She was feeling the air around her, not as temperature, as information. When Vess held his hand 30 centimeters from her face without touching her, she tracked it with her eyes closed. When he moved equipment behind her back, she turned toward it before it made a sound. She was sensing displacement, air pressure, vibration through solid surfaces. She was building a sensory map of the room that did not require sight or hearing. Day 7, and she was still functioning normally. She was functioning better than normally. That was the horror. She was not impaired. She was not in distress. She was cheerful. She told Vess the scans were fascinating and asked if she could see the data. She discussed the implications with him for 30 minutes, drawing parallels to Kessoth's cellular research. She was engaged, professional, interested. She was a scientist observing her own transformation with the mild curiosity of someone watching a weather pattern through a window. Did she express any concern? She asked Vess 2 questions. The first was whether the changes would be permanent. Vess said he could not be certain. She nodded. The second question was whether anyone else on the station had been similarly affected. Vess said no. The catalyst interacted uniquely with human biology. She was quiet for a moment after that. Then she said, "So I am the only variable in the room." Not as a complaint, not with any drama, as a statement of fact. A researcher identifying the single changed element in an experiment. I think that was the moment I first felt uncomfortable around her. Not afraid, just aware. Aware that she was processing her own situation with a clarity that most people could not manage when ordering breakfast. Go on. There was an incident at dinner that evening. The mess hall. She was eating alone as usual. Operative Kresh was at the next table with 2 others from his unit. Kresh had a habit of tapping his fork against the edge of his tray, an unconscious rhythmic tick. 3 taps, pause, 3 taps. He had been doing it for 6 days and nobody had ever mentioned it. Sadler looked up from her food and said, "Your second cervical vertebra is misaligned. That tapping rhythm is compensatory. You are trying to reduce tension in your neck. If you rotate your head 30 degrees left and apply pressure behind your right ear, the clicking will stop." Kresh stared at her. She went back to eating. Kresh tried the rotation. The clicking stopped. He had lived with that neck tension for 2 years. She diagnosed a spinal misalignment from the sound of a fork. From the rhythm of a fork. From the specific pattern of the tapping, she had reverse-engineered the muscle tension that was producing it, mapped that tension to a skeletal origin and prescribed a correction. At dinner, between bites, she did not look up again. To her, it was obvious. It was the same kind of observation as noticing that someone's shoelace was untied. And the security team. Thesic was nervous. He did not say so. Thesic was not the kind of officer who said things like that, but I could see it in the way he positioned his teams. He doubled the patrol rotation around the medical bay. He reassigned Operative Morath to shadow Dr. Sadler whenever she moved between sections. Morath was our largest operative, 2 meters tall, 80 kilograms of bone and muscle, 9 years in the field. He had served on containment details for 3 high-gravity species and a hive intelligence ambassador who required constant supervision. He was not a man who rattled easily. He told me later on day 8 that following Sadler through the corridors had started to feel different. He said she moved differently, not faster, not heavier, just differently. Her footfalls had changed. On day 6 she walked like any civilian, heels first, slightly asymmetric stride, the faint scuff of someone thinking about other things. By day 7 evening her gait had become perfectly even, perfectly silent, each foot placed with the exact same pressure, the exact same timing. He said it was like watching someone who had always been walking through the station half asleep suddenly wake up. Wake up. His exact word. He said she was awake now and everything before had been sleepwalking. He also said something else that stayed with me. He said she looks at walls the way I look at doors, like she is seeing what is on the other side. Were there other incidents on day 7? One more. At 2200, just before the night cycle, Vess was in the medical bay preparing for his overnight monitoring shift. Dr. Sadler was in the adjacent quarters. The door between the 2 rooms was closed. Vess was running a calibration routine on his scanner, a standard procedure that involved cycling through several frequency bands. He told me later that he was running the calibration at a volume that was inaudible to every known species on the station. It was a mechanical process. The scanner's internal components vibrated at frequencies well above the threshold of biological hearing. Sadler knocked on the door. She asked Vess if he could run the calibration in a different room because the high-frequency cycling was giving her a headache. He asked her how she could hear it. She said, "I can hear everything in this room. I can hear the power bus cycling behind the north wall. I can hear the fluid in the oxygen recycler 2 decks below us. I can hear Operative Moreth's pulse in the corridor outside." She said it the way someone might mention that a light was flickering, an annoyance to be noted, nothing more. Ilesi shifted in her chair. Voreth could see her crest fighting to rise, the Dremery threat response, the body wanting to signal alarm, and being forced flat again by conscious effort. "Day 8, she said. "Day 8, 200. Vess checked Sadler during the night cycle. She was asleep. Or appeared to be asleep. Her eyes were closed. Her breathing was slow and regular. But her brain activity, the scan showed cortical processing at a level Vess had only seen in humans during what they called a fight-or-flight cascade. Her sleeping brain was mapping. He could see it on the neural scan. Pathways lighting up in sequences that corresponded to spatial processing, threat assessment, motor planning. She was drilling. In her sleep, her brain was running tactical drills. "You are certain?" Vess was certain. He added it to his report. He also noted that her resting heart rate had dropped again from 54 to 39 beats per minute. Her body temperature had risen 2 degrees. The capillary density in her hands had visibly increased, the skin darkening around the knuckles and fingertips as more blood routed to her extremities. Her grip strength, tested while she was still groggy from waking, had increased by 31% over her baseline measurement from 11 months earlier. And at this point her cognitive function. Vess ran a full cognitive battery at 700, pattern recognition, spatial reasoning, reaction time, working memory, abstract logic. She scored in the 99th percentile of documented human performance on every metric, but she had not scored anywhere near that in her intake evaluation. She had been average, competent, unremarkable. In 36 hours, she had shifted to the ragged edge of her species' capability curve. And Vess said the curve was still moving. He did not know where it ended. He was not sure it had an end. What did Thesic do? Thesic convened a security briefing at 800. All 3 team leads. Vess attended. The briefing lasted 40 minutes. Thesic asked 3 questions. First, can we reverse it? Vess said he did not know. The catalyst was Kessoff technology interacting with human biology in ways that were not in any database. Second, is she aware of the changes? Vess said yes, she was a scientist, she understood the data, and she had been remarkably calm about it. Third, is she a threat? And Vess said. Vess paused for a long time. I was in the room. I watched his face. He was choosing his words with the care of a man dismantling an explosive device. He said, "She is not a threat yet, but her body is treating the catalyst as a set of optimization instructions, and it is following those instructions to their logical conclusion. In Kessoff biology, the logical conclusion is faster healing. In human biology, the logical conclusion is the most efficient predator this station has ever contained. And we are not containing her. We are monitoring her. There is a difference, and the difference is narrowing by the hour." Thesic ordered containment. Thesic ordered a security cordon around the medical bay and a request for emergency extraction to the conclave relay. The extraction request was received at 9:30. The conclave's response arrived at 1400. Situation assessed as non-critical. Continue monitoring. Extraction assets unavailable for 14 days. They were 11 light hours away. They were reading reports on screens. They were not standing in the corridor outside the medical bay watching Dr. Maren Sadler walk 6 miles through the station in 90 minutes without a map. She walked the station. Every corridor, every junction, Every maintenance hatch, every emergency access, every ventilation grill, every pressure door. She told Vess she wanted to stretch her legs. She walked methodically, section by section, pausing at intersections, looking up at the ceiling, sometimes placing her hand flat against the wall and standing still for 10 or 15 seconds before moving on. What was she doing? Learning. Later, much later after the extraction, the Conclave forensic team found her fingerprints on 217 surfaces throughout the station. Wall panels, structural supports, door frames, deck plating. Every print was positioned over a structural junction, a power conduit, or a pressure-bearing element. She was reading the station through her hands, feeling the vibrations, the temperature differentials, the way stress propagated through the hull. By midday on day 8, she knew the station the way she knew her own body. Better, perhaps. She knew things about the station that the Kesseth engineers who built it had forgotten. The pressure differential. Corridor 7. Operative Dresk encountered her standing motionless, staring at a wall panel 2 meters above the deck. She told him there was a sealant failure at Junction 14 that would propagate to the oxygen line on Deck 5 within 36 hours. The maintenance team confirmed it 4 hours later. She had detected it by listening to the air move through 20 centimeters of hull alloy. And that was the turning point. That was the first time any of us understood that we were not dealing with a medical situation. That was the moment the word containment started meaning something different in every operative's head. The power failure. 2300, day 8. It was not a failure. The Kesseth research team had been running secondary experiments on the catalyst all day, trying to understand its interaction with human biology. They had been drawing blood samples from Sadler at regular intervals. On the final draw, at 2100, something went wrong. Sadler's blood reacted with the collection apparatus. Her immune cells, the ones the catalyst had been optimizing for 36 hours, identified the sample container's lining as a foreign organism and attacked it. Her blood ate through medical-grade Kesseth alloy in under 4 minutes. Iles's stylus slipped from her fingers. She did not pick it up. The containment unit that held the blood samples was connected to the lab's primary power bus through a monitoring circuit, Voreth continued. When the samples corroded through their containers, the biological material created a short across the power bus. The cascade propagated through 6 junction boxes in under 90 seconds. Main power dropped across the entire station. The backup lighting, same bus architecture, went with it. The emergency systems on an independent circuit activated after 90 seconds, but by then the station was dark. 90 seconds of total darkness. 90 seconds. I counted them. Everyone counted them. 41 trained security specialists in full combat rigs, and every single one of us lost our composure. I could hear it on the comms channel, breathing that was too fast, a weapon charging that nobody had ordered, someone's boots scraping the deck as they pressed their back against a wall. 90 seconds of nothing. And then the red emergency lights came on, dim and pulsing, barely enough to see your own hand. And Dr. Sadler. The medical bay camera was on the emergency circuit. I had a feed on my wrist unit. When the red light came on, I checked it. She was sitting on the edge of her cot, cross-legged, hands resting on her knees. Calm. She was looking directly at the camera, not at the room, at the camera. She knew exactly where it was, and her eyes. He stopped, swallowed. Her pupils had dilated, not the way they should have in darkness, proportionally, reactively. They had expanded to cover most of her iris, nearly edge to edge. The iris was a thin ring of bright, glass-clear color around a black center that seemed to drink the emergency light. Vess later wrote that her tapetum lucidum, a reflective layer that humans do not have, that no human has ever had, appeared to be developing in real time. Her eyes were restructuring themselves to gather light in conditions that should have been functionally blind for her species. She could see in the dark. She could see in the dark. Not with equipment, not with augmentation. Her biology was building the solution on the spot. In the time it took the emergency lights to activate, her visual system had begun remodeling itself. By morning, Vess estimated, the process would be complete. She would see in darkness as well as any deep cave predator in the Conclave's zoological archive. And her other senses, expanding all of them simultaneously. When Thesic sent Operative Marath to check on her in the medical bay at 23:30, she told Marath before he opened the door through the closed door that his heart rate was elevated and that he should take a slower breath. She said she could hear his pulse through a pressure door, through 30 centimeters of reinforced alloy. Marath stood in the corridor for 9 seconds without moving. Then he reported back to Thesic. He said 3 words. She heard me. The morale impact. Marath's report went through the security channel. Every operative on the station heard it. The effect was immediate. I can describe it precisely because I felt it in my own body. It was the moment when fear stopped being theoretical. Before that, Sadler's changes were data on Vess's screen. Numbers. Percentages. Abstract. After Marath's 3 words, every operative on the station understood that the small woman in the gray pullover could hear their heartbeat through a reinforced door. The corridors felt different after that. The walls felt thinner. Every room felt observed. How did the operatives respond? Some of them stopped talking, stopped using the comms channel for anything beyond essential coordination. Operative Tenna, our communications specialist, told me later that she had spent the last 2 hours of day 8 breathing as quietly as she could manage because she had become convinced that Sadler could hear the difference between a calm breath and a frightened one, and she did not want Sadler to know she was frightened. Whether that was true, Tenna did not know. But she believed it, and the fact that it was plausible was the problem. The psychological dimension. The psychological dimension was the real containment failure. We could have managed a fast subject, or a strong subject, or even a subject with enhanced senses. We had protocols for all of those. What we did not have a protocol for was a subject who was becoming more aware of us with every passing hour, more aware than we were of ourselves. The power dynamic inverted without a single shot being fired. She was not threatening us. She was not hostile. She was still the same quiet, professional woman she had been for 11 months. But she was paying attention now, all of her attention. And the weight of being seen that completely, it eroded composure faster than any weapon. Thesic ordered containment at this point. 100 Day 9, Thesic assembled a 6-operative team, full suppression gear, ionic lances, neural dampeners, mag cuffs rated for high-gravity species. The team entered the medical bay through the primary door and the emergency hatch simultaneously. Standard pincer formation. They had trained for this. They had drilled it hundreds of times across dozens of deployments. They were very good at it. And she was not there. Not there. She had left the medical bay through a maintenance access panel that measured 28 centimeters across. The forensic team measured it afterward. 28 centimeters. She had dislocated her own shoulder to fit through it. The bioscan log, Vess had a passive scanner running on her tag, showed the bone relocating itself 12 seconds after it came out of the socket. Full relocation. Zero assistance. Her body repaired the deliberate injury faster than the scanner could flag it as an anomaly. Where did she go? Into the ventilation system. And from the ventilation system into the spaces between the walls, and from the spaces between the walls into parts of the station that the Kesoth blueprints did not show as accessible to any organism larger than a maintenance drone. She was evading containment. No, that is what we thought at first, that she was running, that she was afraid. That was the frame we put on it because it was the only frame we had. A subject evades, security pursues. We understood pursuit. What we did not understand, what took us far too long to understand, was that she was not running from us. She was learning us. Learning. Every time we moved, she watched. Not from hiding, from awareness. She knew where every operative was because she could hear our heartbeats through the walls. She knew our patrol patterns because she had watched us run them for 6 days. She knew our communication frequencies because she had been sitting in the mess hall while we spoke on open channels. She knew our weapon capabilities because she had watched us drill. And now, optimized, ungoverned, running on a version of human cognition that had no precedent in any file, she was building a complete tactical model of our operation in real time. Not to fight us, to manage us. Manage. I will come back to that. Let me tell you about the containment attempts first. How many? 7, over the course of day 9. Each one with fewer people and less confidence than the last. Give me the sequence. Attempt 1, the pincer in the medical bay, empty room. She was already in the ventilation system. Attempt 2, thermal sweep of Deck 4, 4 operatives with imaging equipment calibrated for standard biological heat signatures. They swept for 2 hours, found nothing. Because her body temperature had dropped from its elevated state to 29 degrees, she had suppressed her metabolic output. The thermal imagers read her as part of the hull. Consciously, I do not know if there was a meaningful distinction anymore between conscious and unconscious in her state. The catalyst had integrated with her autonomic nervous system. Her body was making tactical decisions that her waking mind may not have been directing. She was running on something beneath thought, something that human biology apparently keeps locked behind a dozen evolutionary safeguards that the catalyst had dissolved one by one. Attempt 3. Acoustic sweep. 3 operatives with resonance scanners trying to detect her movement through the station's superstructure. She was motionless for 4 hours, perfectly still. No heartbeat signature above the scanner's noise floor. Her resting pulse had dropped to 28 beats per minute, so slow that the equipment classified it as ambient vibration. When the sweep team moved to Deck 6, she moved to Deck 3. She was waiting for them to leave. 4. Electromagnetic bait. Thesic had the engineering team rig a false power restoration in the shuttle bay, hoping the M signature would draw her toward an ambush. She did not go to the shuttle bay. She went to the engineering team's position and removed the power cells from their equipment while they were focused on the bait. They did not hear her. They did not see her. They discovered the missing cells 20 minutes later. She left them in a neat stack beside the corridor junction, with the cell's charge indicators facing up, organized, tidy, as if she wanted them to find the cells easily. She was sending a message. She was sending several. With each attempt, she demonstrated a different capability: speed, stealth, environmental awareness, tactical patience, counter-surveillance. She was not just evading us, she was educating us, showing us one capability at a time exactly how outmatched we were, and every demonstration was gentle. There was no aggression, no dominance display. She removed the power cells and left them in a neat stack the way a teacher might return a confiscated toy to a child. Here, you can have this back, but you see the point. You said she was educating you. I understood later after the extraction, when I had time to sit in a hospital bed and think about everything that had happened in sequence, that she was trying to de-escalate. Every demonstration was a message. You cannot catch me. You cannot contain me. I am not a threat to you. Please stop before someone gets hurt. She could not say it directly because Thesic would not have listened, so she showed us, one capability at a time, each one more impossible than the last. Each one delivered without harm. She was giving us reasons to stop. But Thesic did not stop. Thesic was a career security officer with 9 commendations and an extraction record that spanned 42 operations across 11 systems. He did not stop because he did not know how to stop. His training had one mode for a situation like this: contain the subject. Escalate force until containment is achieved. The possibility that the subject had moved beyond the operational ceiling of his entire unit was not a scenario his training covered, so he kept ordering attempts. 5, 6, 7. Attempt 5. Thesic sent his 3 best operatives into the ventilation system to track her. Specialists. They had trained in confined space operations on 3 station types. They had extraction gear, resonance mappers, and microdrones for navigation. They lasted 40 minutes. She circled behind them through a secondary duct that was not on the station schematics, a construction gap between the inner and outer hull that she had found by feeling the wall vibrations, and welded the ventilation access shut with a maintenance torch she had taken from the engineering bay. She welded it cleanly. The seam was even. The forensic team later noted that the weld quality was consistent with professional hull work. She had learned to weld at some point during the previous 20 hours. The 3 operatives had to be cut out. They were uninjured, but one of them, Operative Resk, a 12-year veteran, would not speak afterward. He told the transport medic that the worst part was not the 40 minutes in the sealed duct. The worst part was that while they waited to be cut out, they could hear her on the other side of the bulkhead. She was humming a song, quietly, to herself, while she walked away. Attempt 6. Thesic tried a negotiation approach. He stood in Corridor 7 and spoke to the ceiling. He told her the situation was under control, that no one intended to harm her, that extraction was on its way. He asked her to come out. She answered through the ventilation grill above his head. She said, "Commander, your heart rate is at 104. Your voice stress pattern indicates you are not being fully truthful. The extraction you mentioned was denied 6 hours ago." I intercepted the Conclave's response on the communications relay before the power went out. "There is no extraction coming. You should sit down and conserve your energy." Thesic did not sit down. He ordered Attempt 7. Everyone who could still hold a weapon. 9 operatives. Systematic deck-by-deck sweep, every section, every compartment, every space large enough to hide a human body. They swept for 3 hours. And they found nothing, because she was not hiding, she was moving. Staying exactly 1 section ahead of the sweep, using the station's maintenance corridors and ventilation network, and the spaces between the double hull to stay ahead of 9 armed operatives, coordinating on a shared comm channel that she could hear. She could hear the comms. She could hear everything. By day 9, her auditory range extended into the radio frequency spectrum that our encrypted comms operated on. She could not decode the encryption, but she could hear the carrier wave. She could track our positions by the timing of our transmissions. Our communications system, designed to coordinate us, was telling her exactly where we were at every moment. The casualties. Voreth's mouth went dry. He reached for the water container, drank, set it down. "She did not kill anyone," he said. "I need you to hear that clearly. In 9 days, with 41 armed operatives trying to contain her in a sealed station with no main power and failing life support, Dr. Marin Sadler did not kill a single person. Then how were your forces neutralized?" "She disabled them, one by one, with our own weapons. She had taken a neural dampener from Operative Dresk on day 8 during the Corridor 7 encounter. He did not know she had taken it until he reached for his sidearm 4 hours later and found an empty holster. She had figured out the firing mechanism, the charge cycle, the effective range, and the optimal targeting points on Kesoth, Dremery, and Vorathi anatomy. The tactical AI, in its final log before it went offline, described her accuracy as consistent with extensive specialized training. She had never held the weapon before day 8. She learned the weapon in hours. She learned everything in hours. That is what the catalyst did to human cognition. It did not make her smarter in the way we usually mean the word. It made her faster at learning. Every piece of information she encountered, a weapon's weight, a door's hinge tolerance, a guard's patrol timing, the resonant frequency of a hull panel, was absorbed, integrated, cross-referenced, and applied. She was not thinking faster. She was thinking in more dimensions simultaneously. The tactical AI's final log entry included a processing estimate. It calculated that managing the number of simultaneous variables Sadler was tracking would require a computational array roughly equivalent to the station's entire sensor grid. She was doing it with a brain that weighed 1.4 kilograms. How did she neutralize the operatives? One at a time, over approximately 6 hours. The sequence reconstructed from bioscan tags and partial security logs showed a pattern. She would identify the most isolated operative and approach from a direction outside their detection range. She would close to dampener range approximately 3 meters and fire once. The neural dampener induced immediate unconsciousness. No pain, no injury. The operative simply stopped. She would then check their vital signs, reposition them into a recovery posture, remove their weapons, and move to the next target. The entire process per operative took between 4 and 7 minutes. She checked every pulse. She positioned every body. She made sure no one's airway was compromised. No one was lying on a limb that might lose circulation. No one was in a position where the station's failing temperature control might cause hypothermia. She was methodical. She was clinical, a surgeon working through a patient list. There was no anger in it, no satisfaction, no rush. She moved through the station's population the way a medic would move through a triage bay, assessing, stabilizing, moving on. The difference was that she was the one causing the unconsciousness and also the one treating it. She was both the problem and the solution, and she seemed entirely comfortable with both roles. 34 operatives found unconscious. All found in recovery positions, not collapsed where they fell, arranged. She had dragged or carried each one to a location with adequate airflow and ambient temperature, checked their vital signs. The medical team found thumb pressure marks consistent with pulse checks on every operative's neck, and placed them on their sides to prevent aspiration. She took their weapons and stored them in an orderly stack in the cargo bay. The weapons were unloaded, safeties engaged, arranged by type. And the remaining 7. 3 were injured during the containment attempts, not by Sadler, by themselves. Operative Ying triggered her own suppression grenade in a stairwell because she heard footsteps above her and panicked. The footsteps were the station's cooling system cycling down. Sadler was on the other side of the station. Operative Kresh fell down a ladder shaft in the dark and broke his leg. Operative Tun cut herself on a torn wall panel while crawling through a maintenance space. All 3 received field treatment, splints, pressure bandages, antiseptic, that they did not apply to themselves. Sadler treated their injuries. She left medical supplies next to each one, in the dark, without being seen. Kresh's splint was made from 2 sections of cable conduit cut to precisely the right length, and bound with medical tape from the field kit she had taken from the medical bay. Ying's burn dressing was applied, while Ying was unconscious from her own grenade. Tun's bandage was wrapped with a tension that the post-extraction medical team described as professional grade. And the other 4. Commander Thesic, Dr. Vess, Operative Morath, Communications Specialist Tenna. They tried to reach the shuttle bay as a group, the last organized movement. They made it to Deck 2, corridor between junctions 9 and 10. They found a message scratched into the wall plating. Scratched how? With her fingernails. The forensic team confirmed it. Sadler's fingernails, by day 9, had developed a density and hardness that allowed her to score marks in Kesoth hull alloy. The message was in Kesoth script. She had learned enough in 11 months to read and write the language at a functional level. It read, "The shuttle fuel cells have been removed. I have repurposed them for the oxygen recyclers. You have approximately 14 hours of breathable atmosphere. I suggest you stop running and sit down. You are safe." She ensured the air supply. She took the shuttle's fuel cells, the only means of escape from the station, and jury-rigged them into the oxygen recycling system to keep the air breathable after the main power failed. She did this in the dark, working with tools she had collected from maintenance bays across 4 decks, using engineering knowledge she had absorbed by walking the station once and touching the walls. She kept us alive. And Thesic's team. Found unconscious in the corridor at Junction 10, neural dampened, in recovery positions, with thermal blankets cut from the cargo bay's insulation draped over them. She had tucked the blankets around Thesic's shoulders. Voreth's voice cracked. He waited until he could speak again. "She fed us," he said. "Fed you." On day 9, after the last containment attempt failed and every team had been neutralized and I was the only one still conscious, hiding in the ventilation shaft, she left food at the grills. Ration packs. Opened, portioned, placed precisely where they could be reached. One at each grill that had a conscious operative behind it. And when there was only me, because I was the last one, she left a ration pack and a water container and a folded emergency blanket at the grill nearest to my position. She knew where you were. She had always known where I was. She knew where everyone was, every heartbeat, every breath, every position, every state of consciousness. She was tracking 42 biological signatures across 12 decks of a failing station in total darkness while simultaneously managing the oxygen supply, treating injuries, disabling armed operatives without permanent harm, and keeping herself fed and hydrated from supplies she had cached in advance. She was doing all of it the way you or I would manage a routine shift, without strain, without urgency, without visible effort. When extraction arrived, the extraction team, the one the Conclave finally sent when Thesic's distress beacon auto-triggered, cut through the emergency bulkhead at 1400 hours. 24 operatives in full assault configuration. They breached expecting combat. They expected a hostile environment, a compromised station, possible casualties. They came in with weapons hot and formation discipline that would have made Thesic proud. What they found was a clean station, functional oxygen, stable temperature. She had adjusted the environmental controls to maintain a comfortable range across the inhabited sections. 34 unconscious operatives arranged in recovery positions in 3 clusters. She had grouped them by species, so that the ambient temperature in each location matched the thermal preference for that physiology. The Kesoth operatives were in a slightly warmer section near the reactor shielding. The Dremery were in a cooler corridor near the exterior hull. The medical team later said the placement was medically optimal. 3 treated wounded, a neat stack of disarmed weapons in the cargo bay, organized by type and serial number, with a handwritten inventory on a torn piece of data film placed on top. The inventory was accurate, every weapon accounted for, every charge level noted. Me, in the ventilation shaft, refusing to come out until someone physically cut the grill and told me it was over. And Dr. Marin Sadler in the command chair, feet up, drinking water from her jury-rigged canteen, reading a technical manual for the station's environmental systems by the light of a bioluminescent culture she had grown from lab samples in a jar. She had made her own light source, from scratch, in the dark. What happened to her afterward? Conclave Medical Board custody. They ran tests for weeks. I was given a partial summary because I was classified as a primary witness. The catalyst's effects faded slowly, not in a collapse, one capability at a time, in roughly the reverse order they had appeared. Her auditory range narrowed first. Over the course of 5 days, she lost the ability to hear through walls, then lost the subsonic frequencies, then settled back to standard human range. Her visual acuity followed. The expanded pupils contracted. The reflective layer that Vess had documented in her retinas did not disappear. It thinned, became less active, but the cellular structures remained. Her muscle density decreased gradually over 2 weeks. Her resting heart rate climbed from 28 to 39 to 47 to 55 and then stopped climbing. 55, not the 62 she had measured at intake. Lower, more efficient. As if her cardiovascular system had been redesigned during the optimization, and the design was better than the original. The Conclave tested her extensively. They tested everything they could think of: strength, endurance, reflexes, cognitive processing, immune function, metabolic efficiency, sleep architecture, pain response. On every metric she measured above her pre-catalyst baseline, not dramatically. A few percentage points here, a faster reaction time there, small margins, but the margins were consistent across every system. As if her body had been taken apart, examined, and put back together with minor improvements at every junction. And she was aware of the residual changes. She described them in her own debrief as feeling tuned. She said it was like she had spent her entire life playing an instrument that was slightly out of tune and had not known it until the tuning was corrected. She said food tasted more specific. Sounds had more texture. She could feel the grain direction of surfaces she touched. She said none of it was dramatic. It simply felt like she had always been meant to operate at that level. That is significant. That is what the medical board found most significant, not the peak capabilities during the 9 days. Those faded. What did not fade was the body's memory of what it was capable of. The pathways remained, dormant, thinned, but present. Vess's final contribution to the board's report included a projection classified at the highest available level. He projected that if Dr. Sadler were exposed to any optimization catalyst a second time, her body's response would be faster, more efficient, and more extreme, because it would not be building pathways from scratch. It would be reopening pathways that already existed. The ceiling of the second optimization would be higher than the first, and the ceiling of the third would be higher still. He used the phrase iterative improvement. He said human biology, once shown what it could do, did not unlearn. It archived. It prepared. It waited. Did you see the projections? No, but I saw Dr. Vess's face when he came out of the briefing. Vess had treated Kesoth soldiers and Dremori Marines and species from 16 worlds, and he was not a man who unsettled easily. He looked at me in the corridor and he said one thing. He said, "We have been studying humans for 30 years, and we have been studying the wrong thing." The wrong thing. We studied what humans are, their strength, their durability, their immune system, their pain tolerance. We measured the traits, cataloged them, filed them, ranked them, built databases, wrote threat assessments, published papers, and every one of those papers described a human operating at 60%, behind the governors, behind the limits, behind every biological cage that evolution built to keep the engine from consuming itself. We studied the cage and told ourselves we understood the animal. And now you have seen the animal. I saw the door open. That is all. Vess said her optimization on day 9 was not the ceiling. It was not even close to the ceiling. The catalyst was a crude Kesoth compound that was not designed for human biology. The interaction was uncontrolled, unguided, accidental. And it produced a being who could see in the dark, hear through walls, track 42 heartbeats simultaneously, learn a weapon in hours, dislocate and repair her own joints in seconds, move through spaces that should not have fit her, suppress her metabolic signature at will, corrode alien alloy with her blood, and keep an entire station of armed operatives alive without killing any of them. That was accidental. That was the door cracking open an inch. Voreth stood. His ruined hand hung at his side. His good hand rested on the table, steady for the first time since the ventilation shaft. "There is one more thing," he said. "Yes." When extraction escorted Dr. Sadler to the transport, she passed me in the corridor. I was sitting on the deck with my back against the wall. She stopped. Looked down at me. Her eyes were still not fully back to normal, the pupils still too large, the irises still that glass-clear brightness. She knelt beside me and checked the bandage on my hand, the 3 missing fingers. She adjusted the pressure seal, tightened it, gentle, efficient, and she said, "You should keep this elevated. The swelling will go down in about 3 days, and you should eat something. You have been in that shaft too long." She knew. She had always known. I asked her. I do not know why, maybe because I was exhausted and frightened, and this small woman was kneeling next to me adjusting my bandage, as if I had not spent 2 days trying to capture her. I asked if she had been able to track all 41 of us simultaneously. What did she say? She said 42. You keep forgetting to count me. Silence filled the debrief chamber. Ilysse's crest was flat, pressed so hard against her skull that the edges whitened. She kept count, Voreth said. Of all of us, everyone, not because she was hunting us, because she was making sure nobody died. Her body was operating at a level that should have been impossible. Every system optimized past the boundaries of any species in any conclave database, and she used all of it to keep 42 people alive in a dead station. That is what frightens you. What frightens me is that it did not cost her anything. It did not strain her. It did not push her. Maintaining awareness of 42 people across 12 decks for 2 days while managing oxygen and neutralizing threats and treating injuries. She described the 9 days afterward on the transport's recorder as a lot, but I have had worse weeks. She has had worse weeks on Earth, in a civilian life, with every governor intact. She considers that normal. Ilyse opened her mouth, closed it, her crest twitched. The danger is not that humans can become something extraordinary when the limits come off, Voreth said. The danger is that when they do not become monsters. They become caretakers. And a caretaker with no limits is the most frightening thing I have ever encountered, because you cannot fight someone who has already decided you are worth protecting. He walked to the door, put his 3-fingered hand on the frame. Update the threat classification, he said, and tell the Conclave that the next time they consider a containment protocol for a human being, they should ask themselves one question first, not whether they can hold one. What happens to the human while they try? Because the answer is that the human gets better, every hour, every day, every attempt. The human gets better at everything, and the containment gets worse, and eventually you are not running the station anymore. He opened the door, stopped, turned back one last time. She spoke to me through the ventilation grill on day 9, he said. Early hours, I could not see her, I could only hear her voice. Quiet. Calm, she said. Specialist Voreth, you have been in there for almost 30 hours. The air is better in Corridor 4. I cleared it for you. There is food by the junction. You should eat. He looked at Ilyse. That is the trait, he said. Not the strength, not the senses, not the speed or the healing or the tactical cognition. The trait is that all of it, every impossible thing the catalyst unlocked, was in the service of keeping people alive. Every capability pointed at the same target, make sure nobody dies. That is what no database ever measured. That is what no threat assessment ever modeled. The question is not what humans can do. The question is what humans are for. And the answer is the most terrifying thing in the Conclave's files. He stepped through the door. It closed behind him. Ilyse sat alone. The debrief chamber hummed. Dr. Sadler's bioscan data glowed on the datapad, clean columns of numbers that should have been impossible, arranged in the neat order of a species that did not know its own depth. She picked up her stylus, set it to the classification field at the top of the form. The drop-down offered 12 options, from minimal to extinction class. She scrolled past all of them. She opened a text field and typed 3 words. Classification, beyond parameters. She saved the file, stood, and walked out of the chamber. The corridor was bright and clean and ordinary. Somewhere in the building, in a room very much like this one, a quiet woman in a gray pullover was probably reading something, probably drinking coffee, probably looking like nothing at all. Ilyse walked faster. She did not look at the walls. She was not sure anymore what they might be listening to. Not look at the walls. She was not sure anymore what they might be listening to.